Hi guys, today in this video we're going to be talking about 3 mistakes I made as a beginner lifter that you should definitely avoid. Alright, so the first mistake that I want to talk about, and something I definitely did when I started training, was beating a dead horse, right? So what I mean by this is when you're in a program, you're training, you've been doing the same program maybe for a few weeks, and you kind of just plateau, you kind of stop making progress, and you just can't seem to figure out exactly what it is, right? And so what you normally want to do is try and look back at what you've been doing, reconsider, maybe see what isn't working, what is working, and maybe modify and go from there. But what I definitely did a couple times was just try to grind through plateaus. So just beating a dead horse. So thinking, oh yeah, this maybe isn't working, but just not changing, not trying to do anything, not changing my program, not using different lifts, exercise selection, volume, intensity, manipulating anything, just doing the exact same thing and just trying to grind through and just hope, cross my fingers that hopefully I break through this plateau. But unfortunately, that doesn't always work. A lot of times, if you're plateaued, so if you haven't made any progress for several weeks and you've done the deloads, you've got your recovery on point, you're going to the gym consistently, but you're just not making any progress. There has to be something wrong there with the programming. There's no way that you could be on point with everything and still somehow be completely stalled unless you're like, if you were to say, oh man, I've been plateaued, I've been stalled at like 10 weeks, I haven't made any progress, and then it's like, okay, so what's your nutrition like? It's like, oh, I'm cutting. It's like, well, yeah, of course you're gonna be kind of plateaued. You're probably gonna even regress because if you're in a deficit, you're cutting, you're gonna have less energy, obviously. But if you've got everything else is in line and that one thing struggling, you might need to look at your programming. All right, so that was my first mistake. The second mistake I want to talk about, and I think this applies to a lot of people, is poor exercise selection. So that's pretty broad, pretty general. So just basically, just either doing too many exercises. In most cases, I'd see it's either two types of people. It's either doing too many exercises or not doing enough. So you have the guy, the overly minimal guy, that does, his squat, bench, deadlift, which is good. That's all he does. He maybe does some accessories for his squat. He might do squat, and then he might do like leg extensions or lunges or something. Then he does deadlift and then pull ups and then bench and tricep dips, and that's all he does. And he's just like, no, big three. That's all you need. The problem with this is that eventually you're gonna cease to adapt as much on those lifts. So if you do only the big three, you'll get really good at them in the short term because that's what specificity says. That whatever you do, you'll get better at. Obviously, it's just common sense. But eventually, there'll be holes that'll be created in your lifting game, if you want to say, that you can't fill from squat, bench, deadlift. So, for example, in the bench press, it's really common when you see people. They say if you want to bench more, just bench more, right? Which, like I said, if you're looking at specificity as a principle, yeah, that's like you could be more right. Yeah, if you want to bench more, if you want to bench a lot, you need to bench. Like you're not going to increase your bench without benching. But what happens is that for a lot of people, the sticking point is at lockout where the triceps kind of take more of the load, more of the weight. So if you're only benching, yeah, you're going to get really good pec stimulation, but you're not going to be getting sufficient tricep stimulation, or not as optimal as what you would be getting if you're doing bench and say like some tricep accessory like push downs or dips or skull crushes or whatever. So that's just a good classic example of how minimalism can kind of create holes in your lifting game, like I said, or whatever, and you can end up with plateauing and not being able to progress because you've got these like weak points that aren't being sufficiently stimulated. Because with everyone, most people, if they squat, yeah, they're gonna develop their glutes, their quads, like everyone. But some people might have their glutes take over a bit more, or their quads take over a bit more. Or some people deadlift, their back's gonna take over more, or their hamstrings are gonna take over more. Because it is still like it's a compound movement. It uses multiple muscle groups, but some people might benefit heaps from doing leg curls. Because when they deadlift, they don't really stimulate their hamstrings that much. It's all like their glutes maybe. So they could benefit heaps from leg curls. That's another example, or vice versa maybe. And then there's the second guy. So that's the first guy. The first guy is way too minimal. He only does Squat, bench, deadlift, that's all you need, according to him. And this is the second guy who has way too much variety. So this is normally more, so I think the first guy with the minimal is normally more like powerlifters you see. So people are really into strength training, they're like, yeah, nah, big three, that's all you need. And then the other guy with his way too much variety is normally like you see with like bodybuilders. So obviously variety is very important. For one, variety keeps training interesting, so you don't get bored of doing the same thing all the time. And secondly, like I said, you're never gonna have the problem, or if you have like good variety, you'll lower the chance of running into the problem of ceasing to be able to get the adaptations in certain lifts because you just train them so much. So sometimes, like I said, obviously, training is like an S curve, right? So as you train, you get exponentially better and better, and then it kind of tapers off, plateaus, and sort of just plateaus. So if you're training the same movement all the time, you'll get really good at it really quickly, and then it'll taper off, and then you won't really get that much better. So variety makes it so you're constantly being forced to do different things. Body's adapting to different things. Novel stimulus is another thing. So if you do like a certain type of bicep curls for ages, and then you change it, you're getting like a novel stimulus because it's just so new and different. So that's why variety is good. However, I was saying for this example, the guy that does way too much variety, he's never doing the same exercise, maybe more than like once a week. So it makes it hard to exactly know if you're getting better or not. So let's say you do 2 push workouts a week. So you do, on one push workout, you do bench press, and then some shoulder dumbbell press, and then you do flies, and then the next day you do overhead press with a barbell, then tricep dips, and then like incline bench, and then the next day you do like incline shoulder press, and then dips, and then like push-ups, and the next day you're doing like a complete different thing. See, that can be, after a while, it can be kind of confusing. You're like, well, hang on, have I actually progressed in this? So you could look, if you actually look at your program, you're like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm only actually benching like once every 3 weeks because I'm doing so much variation that I'm only actually getting to this one lift, and bench is probably arguably the best lift for pressing, any pressing movement. So you're like, well, hang on a minute, I'm only doing this lift like once every like 2 or 3 weeks. How am I gonna, you're not gonna progress in bench much from doing that. That might not be your goal, but still. So basically, it means that you're never going to be making significant progress in one particular area. So you might be getting small, good little amounts of progress in lots of different exercises, but you're not like I'm putting this many kilos on my bench, and I know. So the third mistake I want to talk about, this is not really a bodybuilding, powerlifting sort of recreational lift. I see this more of like a performance sort of like for athletes, people who go to the gym to try and improve their performance in a certain sport. But this one is trying to increase strength without size, or the refusal to add mass to your frame while wanting to also increase strength. Alright, so there are many reasons why an athlete might want to add strength, because that's going to help their performance without adding mass. So for example, like with MMA or kickboxing, so you see obviously that in that sport they have weight classes, so you have to weigh in, obviously. You can't be over that weight. You have to, and most fighters they have a certain weight class, like they're a lightweight, which is like 70 kilos, and they normally fight at that their whole career, and they don't, maybe towards the end of the career they might go up a weight class, maybe up like the next 5 kilos or whatever, but normally they're in the same weight class. So it's kind of tricky with them, right? Because if they want to add any muscle mass, right, if they want to, which will increase your strength, like if you increase muscle mass, you're automatically going to increase your strength. It's hard for them because if they do that, that means they're going to have to cut more weight in like fat and water to be at the same weight because they've got more muscle. So either they add muscle and then go up a weight class, which is hard because going up a weight class is different competition. It's harder. Yeah, it's different. So that's weird, right? So there's this thing where it's like, oh, and this is sort of like fallacy that's developed where it's like, oh, well, you don't need size to be strong. No, you can be strong. You can train low reps, train like the 3 yeah, one to five rep range, yeah, you'll get really strong. You're not gonna really add muscle, you just get really strong, and it's true, to an extent, right? Because that's the thing. It's the yeah, the 2 to 5 rep range sort of is it's commonly like, the strength. That's like where you're training for strength, right? And then 5 plus is like that's hypertrophy, so it's like size. You see, but it's not really totally. It's not a total just dichotomy like that. It's a little bit more. Uh, the line's a bit more blurred because what's going to happen is that eventually you'll be training in that, like say 3 rep range. You'll be doing your squats. You're doing the 5 sets of 3 or whatever, or 5 sets of 5. Maybe if you're peaking, you start doing like doubles and singles and stuff like this. But eventually, it's kind of like the other example where if you're doing it's like the minimal thing. If you're not doing enough variety, it's like if you're doing the same rep ranges all the time, eventually you'll get really good at that, but then you'll kind of like not be getting good at other things, and you'll stop getting good at that eventually, like you just plateau. And so the best way and the most surefire way to increase strength is to increase muscle mass. So if you think of like a car and like an F1 car, training for strength is like tuning the engine. It's like tuning the parts like in the actual engine, like making the aerodynamics of the car better, like all this like fine tuning things. But eventually that's all good and that'll definitely work. But eventually you're gonna have to increase the size of your engine. Like if you want to have more power, maybe not go faster. But if you want to have more power in your car, you're gonna have to just add more cylinders, which if we're using that analogy would be like adding more muscle mass, right? So more actual contractile tissue that you have on your body will just equal more force output. It will. And so you have this weird thing where it's like you have like these combat sports where it's like, oh yeah, I want to be really strong and athletic and I want to have this performance. But oh no, I don't want to get bigger. No, I don't want to. I want to get. It's like, well, if you get bigger, like if you get bigger and you just get fat, obviously that probably is going to be detrimental. But if you're getting bigger and you're doing it the right way and you're getting muscle mass, that's like the best thing you can do as an athlete, and that's huge. And it's not much either. Like 5 kilos of muscle is like a lot. People think, oh yeah, I want to gain like 10 kilos of muscle in like 5 days, but they don't realize like if you were to gain if you were to put on like 2 kilos of muscle in a week, it would be really obvious. Like it would be like night and day. You would literally be like watching yourself grow in the mirror. Um, so it doesn't have to be a huge amount, but that will have a massive a massive benefit to your performance. And I think a contributing factor to this like misconception is that MMA, especially things like jiu-jitsu, it's all about like the little guy, being the big strong guy. Like you don't need to be big and strong. Like big muscles just make you stiff and uncoordinated, and being the smaller guy with better technique is better than And that's all true. That's all well and good, but why wouldn't you want to be big and strong and also have good technique? Like if you're a good jiu-jitsu athlete or you're a good MMA athlete or kickboxer or boxer or whatever, why would you not want to also have the muscle and the size? Wouldn't you want both? Like you can do both. Like look at someone like Anthony Joshua. Like he's got amazing technique. This is why people like him so much. He's got amazing technique. He's just super, just clinical, like textbook boxer, right? But he's a amazing athlete, and you can just tell by looking at him almost. Yeah, he's an amazing athlete, and obviously, he's one of the most successful boxers, one of the most successful heavyweights in boxing right now. Yeah, so normally, what you'd be doing in your through your training career is if you're wanting to meaningfully increase your strength, you're not just always going to be training like 3 reps, like I said. So you'd be doing you'll do a mesocycle of hypertrophy focus. You'll be training a hypertrophy range with the goal of adding size, not necessarily caring about your big 3 lifts. And it's sometimes difficult to do this because in the short term your top end strength may actually go down a bit, because if you're training in that hypertrophy range, that will decrease your performance in that top end strength. So you might still be doing the same like AMRAP sets, like just AMRAPs of like 5 to 10 or whatever. Might be the same, but your 1 rep max might be like significantly lower from training because you're not getting that specific stimulus to those heavy loads. But in the long run, if you successfully add that muscle mass, when you do go into a strength phase and you actually peak properly, you will massively increase your capacity. Alright guys, so that's it for this video. This is a bit of a rant, a bit of a longer one as well. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment as well. Thanks. See you in the next one.